So, you want to start being a dungeon master, and you also probably want to throw some homebrew rules in there to make your time as a dungeon master a little bit easier. While I don't necessarily recommend doing homebrew rules before you have all the rules, I do have a few that is probably best to try to throw into your game just to make your life a little bit easier. And I have a lot more rules than these, but I feel like if I did more than 10, that would just end up in another like half an hour video, and I don't know if you guys want that one. So here are 10 homebrew rules that I personally use to run my Dungeons & Dragons games.
Kaiser, double.
I take how much damage? Number 1, absolutely no minors, none, zero, zilch, not doing it. I used to have this kind of openness toward kids. That sounds really fucking weird. Don't be weird. I know what it's like to feel out of place as a kid and feel more connected to the adults in your lives. And I also know that some kids don't really feel safe around the adults in their lives. So I like to give a role. I like to be a role model. At least I used to be. Ever since I had problems within the within like my community as a content creator, as well as just at the table, I don't allow anybody under the age of 18 anymore. There's a few reasons, but the main one is basically that it is for the safety of the adults at the table and for the safety at the kids at the table. Now, if you are a dungeon master and you're like, in your early 20s and you want to run something to like teach the teenagers at the school that you work at or something like that, like I understand that. But in my opinion, games should either be all kids or no kids, because it just doesn't work out very well. Not only do you put the kids at risk, because as much as you think you know people, I promise you don't. We used to have this person that I, played Dungeons & Dragons with. Played Dungeons & Dragons with him, played Magic the Gathering with him. He was a really good friend. Everybody at the comic shop loved him. I loved him. We hung out all the time. And then one day, he just vanished. We had no idea where he fucking went. And there was a joke. We were like, dude, did Ian die? Like, what the fuck? And so we ended up Googling his name, and turns out he ended up in jail for doing things with a minor you don't do with a minor as a 23-year-old man. So you think you know people, but you don't. So not only is it for the safety of them, but another problem, and it's one that I've also encountered, is that kids have no sense of self-preservation. And they will put themselves in situations because they're kids, they're stupid, they're idiots. We had this 15-year-old girl who was the younger sister of one of my players, and she joined in. It was me, her older brother, and 2 other dudes that we knew from the college that I worked at. So, we were all playing, and he asked if his younger sister can join, and, we were all cool with it. We were fine. And she became infatuated with one of the other players at the table, like completely and utterly. Like, her older brother told me that they found her diary at one point, and she just had pages and pages and pages dedicated to this guy. And basically, she sexually harassed him, for a lack of a better word. She went after him. She was like, you don't understand. You just gotta wait for me. It's only gonna be 3 more years. And the dude is 25, and he's like, no, I'm not doing that. No. And he was very uncomfortable, and he and the older brother are no longer friends because she just wouldn't leave him alone. She would call him, she would text him, she would show up at his house. She would just do all these kinds of things. And so when it comes to running a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, no minors at my table are allowed. And if I allow any kids at my table, it is a campaign that is nothing but kids, and I don't go below the age of like 16. Right, 16 to 18. That way I can tailor the campaign to the age group, and we can avoid them getting, attached to any of the other players at the table or anything like that. We could be safe about it. But realistically speaking, I just don't like running for kids, so that's what I do. Number 2, consent is king. This is the top priority. Consent is needed between players for every single player-to-player interaction, whether that be combat, romance, arguments, whatever the case may be. There needs to be a slight immersion break, and both players need to have a equal understanding of what their expectations for their character arcs are when the characters are interacting, and they both have to confirm this to me. So let's say Brandon and Jessica want their characters to fall in love. Brandon or Jessica cannot come to me by themselves and say, hey, I think we want to do this romantic interest roleplay. They both have to come to me and say at the base, not the same time, but you get what I'm saying. They both have to confirm with me, and sometimes I'll even have them like sign a little affidavit. I know that seems extreme, but like it's literally just to protect people that play at the table. The thing is with romantic role playing, and the reason a lot of dungeon masters just ban it outright, is that it can lead to some real life feelings pretty fucking easily. This is a little bit of trauma, so if you want to skip that, I understand. I'll put a time code for when I'm done telling the story, but when my ex-wife and I were together, she had a guy that she was, their characters were romantically connected in another campaign that she was a part of with a different group of people, and that ended up being one of the guys she cheated on me with. And after her and I divorced, she got together with him a month later, so... Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons Dungeon Masters ban romance. I don't outright ban it, there just has to be consent. And the same thing happens for like PvP. PvP's fine, but you guys both have to agree to it, and you both have to have a complete understanding of what PvP means. You know what I mean? So yeah, consent is king. Make sure that, and it's not just for player versus player interactions, it's player versus DM. If there's a player that wants to fall in love with one of the NPCs that I have, then they have to come to me and be like, hey, I really like this NPC, I think it'd be cool for my character, and I'll be like, okay, and we just make an understanding. But make sure that everybody at the table consents to everything that is happening. Don't be that fucking guy that just throws out random fucking, sex scenes or whatever onto your players, and as a player, don't just drop onto your DM or onto your fellow players that you're gonna do this fucking wild and out thing. Like, don't do that, man. Make sure everybody's okay with it. Make sure everybody's cool with it. Number 3, session 0 is mandatory. If you do not show up to my session 0, you do not play at the table. Session 0 is where we build our characters. It's where we discuss the start of the story. It's where we, discuss what will happen during the campaign. This is about the time that you would do things like consent sheets, which I've been thinking about making a video on session 0 and consent sheets overall, but it's where you discuss the expectations from everybody at the table. What the players expect is you as a DM, and what the DM expects of the players. Session 0 is something that I think everybody needs to do. Everybody should be well informed in, and if you don't do session 0, then you're going to have a bad campaign. Somebody somewhere is going to fuck up something for everybody else because expectations were not laid out, so do a session 0. Starting with number 4, we're going to get into kind of how the game is actually played this time. So the first thing I do is how I do stat rolls. Now, I do stat rolls a little bit controversial. So there's a basic way to do stat rolls, which is 3d6 6 times, and then you just take the scores and you allocate them wherever you want. I do something a little bit complicated, but see if you can stick with me here. But it would be a little bit better if I showed you guys a visual aid. So my homebrew rule for rolling stats is, I'm sure I'm going to put it somewhere like over here on the screen. But first thing you do is you roll 4d6 and drop the lowest. And you re-roll all 1s and 2s. So here we got 2 6s and we got a 1 and we got 2 1s, so we're going to re-roll those. And we ended up with a 3 and a 5. So we're going to drop the 3, and that's going to end us up with a 17 for a score, right? It's kind of hard to see the paper, isn't it? Oh well. Well, you guys get the gist, right? You can follow along if you want. And then we're going to do this 6 times. So 2 2s, we're going to roll both of those. We got another 2, we're going to re-roll it. And then we're going to drop the 3 for a 15. We got a 1, so we're going to re-roll it. We got a 1, so we're going to re-roll it. We got a 2, so we're going to re-roll it. And there's a 3. That was a 5. So that leads to a 13. Got a 2, so we're going to re-roll it. And that comes out to a 6 for a max of 18. 1, re-roll it. And that's 2 3. So 6, 5, and a 3 is going to come out to 14. Got a 1 and a 2, so I re-roll them both. Got a 1, so I re-roll it. 1 re-roll. 2 re-roll. 2 re-roll. 2. God damn. Is this weighted? Okay, we got it. 6, 12. 6, 12, 16. So that is a 16, and that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is 6 stats. Now, after you do the 4d6, drop the lowest, re-roll 1s and 2s. The minimum amount of stats you can have is a 9. Maximum is 18, before racial bonuses, of course. Once you do that, then you have a stat spread. And the way that I do it, and this is why it's controversial, is every single stat goes in order. So the 17 that we rolled ends up in strength. The 15 ends up in dex. The 13 ends up in con. The 18 ends up in intelligence. The 14 ends up in wisdom. and the 16 ends up in charisma. And I am like 110% certain I mixed up intelligence and wisdom, but I think I got that right. It's been so long since I built a character, guys. So that is how I do it. Now, if you don't like this stat spread, you can re-roll a second stat spread, which I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, and then choose between the two. So let's just say you rolled a 16, and then a 14, and then a 12, and then a 10, and then a 18, and then another 18. Fuck it, right? So then we reassign those. So the first one is a 17. Your two highest stats are a strength and intelligence. That might be good for honestly, there's no classes that go both strength and intelligence, but you could use the 17 to go with a barbarian or a paladin or something like that, right? You don't have a lot of wisdom, but a barbarian or a fighter, you could do a fighter that's an eldritch knight, for example, because you've got those two stats, which is really, really cool. But if you don't like this and you wanted to do, say, a sorcerer, the wisdom and charisma of the second one is really high. The reason I do it this way is because it is more fun, honestly. It's actually more fun. I have had very positive reactions from players in the past when I do this. Everybody's apprehensive at first, but what it does is it forces people to go outside of their comfort zones. So if somebody's used to playing frontliners all the time, but then both of their stat spreads are high in intelligence, maybe they shoot for a wizard. It's a really fun way to do it. This is one of those ones where I don't really recommend you do it this way until you become familiar with the base stat rolling rules. But it's my favorite way to do it, and so I highly recommend it, like I said. Number 5 is critical success. Critical attacks are always max damage plus roll. That's how I do it every time. That's how I'm always going to do it. If you roll to hit, let's say you're rolling, your damage dice is 2d6, right? So let's say you're going in the roll to hit. Dude, please don't mind my dirty desk. I need to clean this so bad. Let's say you're going in the roll to hit and your damage dice is 2d6. So you roll your crit and 2d6 is going to be 12 and you have a damage modifier of 2. So your maximum damage is 14. And then you would roll your 2d6 and it comes out to 10 plus your damage modifier is 2. So that's 12. So 12 and 14 is 28. So you would do 28 total damage. Whatever the max damage is. So if you crit on a Eldritch Blast, which is what? A D10, it would be the D10 plus your charisma modifier, and then you re-roll the D10. You get what I'm saying, right? That's how I do critical successes. It's very straightforward, very easy to keep track of. I don't remember what the actual critical hit thing is in the book. I've literally been using this method for so long that I do not know what the actual rules say. Now, number 6 is, in order to multi-class, you must find a lore reason to enter that class. This comes from a bias I have against min-maxing. I find min-maxing to be incredibly boring and often distracts from building an interesting character and an interesting story. Min-maxing is often done by people who either want to break the Dungeon Master's game or who play way too many fucking video games and think this is a video game. So if you ever want to multi-class in my game, you have to have a lore reason for it. So let's say the Paladin wants to multi-class into Fighter for some fucking reason. Instead of being able to just straight up go, I take a level in Fighter, they would have to find a martial arts master to train them in whichever fighting style they want. They would have to, or explain to me, like, as their journey has gone on and they've started using their sword in different ways and started learning different ways, then they start to, learn the Fighter multi-class. A great way that a great thing to do, or a great thing one of my players did one time, is they were a wizard and they wanted to multi-class into druid. And what they did was they said, hey, DM, I want to multi-class in the druid. Can we find a way for me to do that? I said, sure, I will give you the opportunity and you'll know when it arises. And I ended up putting them in the path of a druid, of a forest spirit who taught them how to be a druid. It's simple things like that, where as long as there's a lore reason, a lore implication, then you can multi-class all you want. And I'll work with you, right? I'm not going to be like, oh, you want to multi-class? Tough shit, titty. You know what I mean? Like I want you guys to, I want my players to feel like they can multi-class. It's just, I want there to be a lore reason, a story reason, you know? The fucking cleric certainly taking a level in sorcerer doesn't make any goddamn sense. You know what I mean? Number 7 is time turns. I found out that time turns is actually controversial. When we did that big list of the DM rules and that dude was like, you got like 1 minute, right? I found out it was actually quite controversial to do time turns. Now, I don't have like a hard time limit, right? Like, I don't pick up my phone, wherever my phone is, and set a timer and be like, 3 minutes, that's all you got. But I kind of keep a little bit of a track, and when it comes close to 3 minutes, I'm like, all right, we need to wrap it up. Because at the end of the day, and I think I mentioned this in one of my other videos, 3 to 5 hours is not as long as you think it is when playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? If you've got a healthy 3 to 5 hour session, you will not get as much done as you think you will. And a lot of that comes from players just simply not knowing what the fuck to do in combat. And usually to help my players out, I will be like, you know, I got Ragor the Barbarian and Fuzzlepuss the Wizard. You know, Ragor's up next. I'll be like, all right, Ragor, it's your turn. And then I'll be Fuzzlepuss the Wizard. You're up after Ragor. And that kind of gets the player to be like, okay, let me see what I need to do. Let me get ready, you know. And then when it comes to their turn, they can, you know, be prepared for everything. Number 8 is everyone gets the spotlight at least once. Unless you don't want it. Every time I start a new campaign, I always tell my players, give me as much backstory as you can within reason, right? I don't need an entire novel. I just need, like, you know, 3-4 paragraphs, maybe a full page. And the more you give me, the more I can work with. So the more, you know, characters in your backstory, your characters' motivations, their flaws, their trauma, whatever you can give me about your character, the more I have to work with. And every single character will get a point in the story where the floor is theirs, where the story arc belongs to them. But if you don't give me anything, you know, if you just say, here is Bradley, the human fighter. Okay, what's his family like? I came from a good family. Okay, fair enough. What's his goals? He just wants to travel. Okay, does he have, you know, flaws or trauma? He drinks a little bit. Okay. Yeah, you know, I have nothing to work with there. Give me something, man. Give me an adopted child or a long lost wife or something like that. You know, you can't just hand me nothing and then be surprised when I don't get to put your character in the spotlight. Now, some players come to the table with the idea that they just want to play, they just want to chill, they don't want a heavy role play or anything. I did that for a little while. My very first campaign, I had a Blue Dragonborn fighter champion named Dragoleus, and his entire motivation was just to travel with the party. He met the party and he just wanted to travel with the party and be a part of their guild, and that was it. He stood outside of doorways when the party was talking, he grumbled a little bit, and he frontlined with the barbarian, and that was his entire thing. And then when I was ready to move on and play a more roleplay heavy character, I gave my DM an adopted son to Dracoleus, who was a monk who abandoned the city guard. So, you know, that's just something you got to keep in mind. And that's what I do as a dungeon master. I tell everyone gets a chance at the spotlight. Make sure you incorporate your players' backstories in so they can feel more connected to their world. You never, ever want your world to just, or your story even, to just be a place where the characters exist. It's not fun that way. You need to give them something. Number 9, roll, stay on the table. Holy shit, listen to me. You do not have to have a fancy rolling tray for your table, okay? We used to use, before I got this, by the way, we used to use a Tupperware container at my table. When me and my ex-wife were together, we had a little D&D group that we played in person. We had a Tupperware container that we used for our rolling tray, okay? Get something and keep the rolls on the table. If you have a bad habit of chucking your fucking dice and they keep ending up on the floor, we're gonna have a fucking problem. And rolls that end up on the floor don't count. So I don't care if you got the critical 20 on that goblin. No, the fuck you didn't. Roll that shit again. And I guarantee you, after a few critical 20s that didn't quite land because it went off the table, your players will learn how to chill the fuck out. And finally, number 10, if I say no, it means no. I am a very big fan of I will make a ruling now, we will check the rulings after, and if I made a mistake, then we can retcon what happened. But realistically speaking, when I say no, I mean no. If I say you can't use that homebrew, you can't use that homebrew. If I say you can't get this magical item right now, you can't get this magical item right now. If I say, no, you can't level up yet because we haven't reached that milestone, no, you can't level up yet because we haven't reached that milestone. I made a video about this. This was my first ever Dungeons & Dragons video about learning how to say no. And the reason for it is that you just have to, right? People think it's mean. They want to please everyone. They want to make sure everybody's having fun. But part of the fun of Dungeons & Dragons is structure. And if we don't have structure, if we don't have some sort of boundaries and limitations, we're not going to have as good of a time as you think. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed it. My recording says 23 minutes, but hopefully after editing, it's not quite that long. But hey, do you want to use any of these rules in your campaigns? Do you think any of these were great? Do you think they were shit? Let me know down below. But other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I love you all so much, and I will see you in the next one.